Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The grand chandelier above sparkled as the soft hum of conversation filled the room. The clink of glasses and the murmur of voices were all she could hear as Emma stepped into the lavish ballroom, her nerves twisting in her chest. The room was filled with people in sharp suits and elegant gowns, a world of wealth and luxury that Emma didn't belong to. Her second-hand dress clung uncomfortably to her frame, and her worn shoes clicked lightly against the marble floor. I promised Jenny I'd try, Emma whispered to herself as she glanced nervously around the room. Her fingers tightened around the invitation she had received just a few days ago, an invitation to a gala she had never imagined attending. She had promised herself to stay strong, but her heart was racing. She wasn't used to this world. She wasn't used to people who lived like this. She finally spotted him, Kevin. At least, that's who she thought he was. A tall figure standing near the far side of the room, scanning the crowd, his black tie perfectly knotted, his dark eyes sharp. Emma took a deep breath and walked toward him. Her steps faltered, but she forced herself forward, heart pounding. "Hi, you must be Kevin," she said with a small smile, unsure of how she sounded. The man looked up, his expression frozen for just a moment. Then, a flicker of confusion crossed his face, but he quickly recovered. Hi. You must be Emma," he replied with a slightly hesitant smile. It didn't quite reach his eyes, and Emma could sense the distance in his voice. He seemed like he was trying to figure her out, just as much as she was trying to figure him out. She blinked, a bit startled. "Wait, you're not Kevin?" she asked, feeling the color rush to her cheeks. The man shook his head, his lips quirking into a half-smile. "I'm not. My name is Liam," he said, pausing for a moment as if deciding whether or not to say more. "Liam Parker." Emma's mind raced. Liam Parker? The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. She'd heard it before in passing, maybe in the news or at the office. But she couldn't quite connect the dots. "Nice to meet you," she said quickly, trying to mask her embarrassment. She glanced at the table, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted her clutch. "Sorry, I guess I'm a little nervous." "It's all right. I think most of us are," Liam said with a soft chuckle. There was an easygoing warmth in his voice that helped ease her tension. "Blind dates, they're something, aren't they?" Emma nodded, grateful for his calm demeanor. "Yeah, definitely. Jenny said you were a bit quiet, but I didn't think it'd be like this," she added, trying to lighten the mood. She laughed nervously, but Liam just smiled. He leaned back slightly, eyes flicking toward the drinks table. "It's a little overwhelming, isn't it? Everyone's so polished. I usually prefer to stay out of the spotlight, but tonight, here I am." His voice held a trace of sarcasm, but it was gentle, and there was an underlying vulnerability in the way he spoke. For a moment, Emma forgot about the awkwardness and simply let the conversation flow. They spoke about the gala, the people around them, and eventually about their personal lives. Emma told him about her job waiting tables and her dream of becoming an artist. She talked about her mother, who was always there for her despite the hard times. And in return, Liam told her about his work in tech. He seemed evasive about the details, but it wasn't surprising. Not everyone was comfortable opening up. But what Emma didn't know was that Liam Parker wasn't just some man at a gala. He was a tech millionaire. A man who lived in a world far beyond the one she could even imagine. And tonight, everything would change. But neither of them knew that yet. After the awkward introduction, Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The grand ballroom felt like a world apart from her reality, polished, glamorous, and distant. She took another glance at Liam, still standing in front of her with that calm yet distant smile. She wasn't sure why, but the way he didn't rush to correct her about his identity made her feel slightly less self-conscious. She smiled awkwardly, trying to ease the tension. "So, tell me, what do you do for a living?" Emma asked, her voice light, but her mind was still spinning. She wanted to keep the conversation going, to forget the embarrassing mistake she'd just made. Liam shifted slightly in his seat, his posture still relaxed, but there was something about the way he looked at her that made her feel like he was sizing her up, not in a harsh way, but with a quiet curiosity. "I work in tech," Liam answered casually, his tone measured. "I run a company." "Tech?" "That sounds complicated," Emma said, her eyes widening. "Like coding?" "Apps and stuff?" she asked, attempting to sound more knowledgeable than she actually was. Liam's lips curved upward slightly at her attempt to understand. "Something like that," he replied, though he didn't go into further detail. Instead, his gaze softened, as if appreciating her earnestness. He leaned back in his chair, resting his elbows on the arms of his seat, still watching her closely. Emma felt the warmth of her cheeks as she spoke, trying to avoid saying anything else that would make her sound foolish. "I'm just a waitress. Nothing glamorous. But it pays the bills, most of them anyway." She quickly reached for her drink, taking a sip to cover the awkwardness. She could feel Liam's eyes on her, and she quickly added, "I've always wanted to open my own art studio though. It's a dream," but she trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. "That sounds like a great dream," Liam replied, his voice soft but steady. "Everyone needs something to reach for." There was something about the way he said it, like he truly meant it, had made her feel seen, even though they were from entirely different worlds. But Emma didn't dwell on that too much, not yet anyway. Instead, she focused on the warmth in his voice, the kind that made her feel a little bit better about her own insecurities. The evening passed slowly, the conversation easing into more comfortable topics. They talked about life in the city, about her dreams, and his vague references to his work. She found herself laughing at some of his dry jokes, even though she didn't entirely understand the intricacies of his world. And in return, Liam seemed to appreciate her honest, unpretentious answers. It was nice, unexpectedly nice. Emma didn't even realize how much time had passed until she glanced at the clock, realizing it was well past the time she had promised Jenny she'd be home. She excused herself, ready to escape the world that felt like it was suffocating her. But as she gathered her things, her phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out, her heart sinking when she saw the message from Jenny. "Where are you?" "I'm at table 7. Looking forward to meeting you, Kevin." Her face flushed crimson as she realized her mistake. She had sat at the wrong table. She wasn't supposed to be talking to Liam at all. "I'm sorry," Emma blurted out, her voice barely above a whisper as she looked up at Liam. "I thought you were someone else. I've been sitting here this whole time thinking you were Kevin." She winced, feeling the heat in her face as the truth of her mistake hit her. Liam blinked in surprise, his brow furrowing for just a second before he let out a soft chuckle. "It's all right," he said, standing up as she began to gather her things. "I'll admit, this is a first for me. But, hey, I'm glad we got to talk." Emma grabbed her coat, feeling like the ground should open up and swallow her whole. "I'll just go find Kevin," she muttered, her voice low, avoiding eye contact. She made her way toward the door, her steps quick and hurried. But as she reached the threshold, she heard Liam's voice call out to her. "Wait." Emma paused, her hand on the door, her back to him. Maybe we could meet again? I mean, you know, without the whole blind date thing?" Liam asked, his tone warmer than before, the smile on his face genuine. Emma turned, surprised by the offer. She hadn't expected him to be so understanding, let alone inviting. She felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. "Yeah, I'd like that," she said, a smile tugging at her lips. "Ilu, I'll text you later." She gave a small wave before stepping outside, the cold air hitting her face as she walked into the night. What she didn't know was that Liam was already thinking about her more than he wanted to admit. There was something about her openness, her lack of pretension, that had intrigued him. And, for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't in years: curiosity. As Emma walked away, she glanced at her phone again, staring at the message from Jenny. She couldn't help but smile to herself, feeling like maybe, just maybe, this mistake wasn't so bad after all. The next few days passed in a blur for Emma. She tried to push the memory of her embarrassing mistake with Liam out of her mind, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't help but think about him. The way he'd smiled at her, the way he didn't seem to mind her awkwardness, it stayed with her. She would catch herself wondering if he'd actually meant it when he suggested meeting again. Was he just being polite, or was there something more? One evening, just as she was finishing up a shift at the diner, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. She stared at the screen for a moment, hesitant. Could it be him? Hey, Emma. It's Liam. I know we left things a bit awkwardly last time, but I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee sometime? No pressure, just wanted to actually get to know you. Her heart skipped a beat. She read the message again, just to make sure it wasn't a prank or some mistake. Liam had actually reached out. She felt a rush of warmth spread through her chest, mixed with a little nervous excitement. She had no idea what this was, but she knew she didn't want to miss the chance to find out. With a quick breath, she typed back, "Sure, coffee sounds nice." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The next day, they met at a small cafe just outside the busy part of the city. It was nothing fancy, just a cozy, quiet place that made the world outside feel distant. As soon as Emma walked in, she spotted him right away. He was sitting at a corner table, wearing a simple sweater and jeans, looking relaxed and different from the man she had met at the gala. He wasn't wearing his sharp suit or polished shoes. There was no hint of the high-powered businessman she had assumed he was. It was refreshing. "Hi," Emma greeted him, trying to keep her voice steady. She felt a little self-conscious at first, but the way Liam smiled when he saw her made her feel at ease. "Hey, Emma. Glad you could make it," Liam said, standing up to greet her. There was no awkwardness this time, just a friendly warmth between them as they both sat down. They ordered their drinks, a coffee for Emma and a black tea for Liam, and began talking. At first, it was small talk about the weather, her job at the diner, and how his day had been, but soon, their conversation deepened, and Emma found herself sharing things she hadn't told anyone in a long time. She talked about her art, about her dreams of someday opening a studio, and how hard it had been to balance that dream with the reality of living paycheck to paycheck. Liam listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers. He didn't interrupt or try to offer advice. He just listened, and that was enough for Emma. "I get it," he said after a pause. "It's tough to keep going when it feels like nothing's working out. But you've got to keep pushing for what you want, even if it feels impossible." His voice was steady, confident, but not in an arrogant way. It was like he understood what she was going through. Emma looked at him, surprised. He wasn't offering her some generic advice like people usually did. He was really listening, and he seemed to genuinely care. "Thanks," she said softly. "It's just hard to see how it all fits together sometimes." "I get that. But you'll get there," Liam said, his voice full of quiet conviction. There was a gentleness in his words that made Emma feel like maybe, just maybe, everything she was working for wasn't as hopeless as it seemed. As the conversation continued, Emma began to realize something: Liam wasn't the person she had imagined him to be. He wasn't just some tech millionaire who had everything figured out. There was a humility to him, a sincerity that she hadn't expected. The more they talked, the more she felt a connection with him, one that went beyond the initial awkwardness of their first meeting. By the time they finished their coffee, the conversation had shifted to lighter topics: funny stories from their childhoods, silly mishaps, and plans for the future. Emma laughed more during that one meeting than she had in weeks, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was actually enjoying herself. As they stood up to leave, Liam turned to her with a thoughtful look on his face. "I know this is all a bit sudden, but I'd like to get to know you better, Emma," he said, his voice soft but sincere. "If you're open to it, maybe we could do this again sometime. Emma's heart fluttered in her chest. She hadn't expected him to say something like that, but now that he had, she realized she didn't want this to be the last time they saw each other. I'd like that, she replied, her smile genuine. They parted ways with a promise to meet again, and as Emma walked back to her apartment, she couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something that didn't need to be perfect or planned. Maybe it was just the start of two people getting to know each other, no strings attached. Over the next few weeks, Emma and Liam met up several more times. Each time, their connection grew stronger, though Emma tried to ignore the feeling that something more was starting to develop. It wasn't supposed to be like this. After all, she had agreed to just meet for coffee, nothing more. But with every conversation, every shared laugh, it became harder for her to deny that there was something real between them. One afternoon, as they were sitting at a quiet cafe, Emma found herself studying Liam more than she had before. He was different from the people she normally interacted with, polished, reserved, and confident. But there was a vulnerability in him too, something that made him more approachable than she expected. She didn't want to overthink it, but she couldn't help it. You've been quiet, Liam said, pulling her from her thoughts. He was watching her carefully, like he could sense the hesitation in her. She didn't know how to explain the mix of emotions swirling inside her. How could she? She barely understood them herself. I'm just thinking, Emma replied softly, stirring her coffee. She didn't look up, but she could feel his gaze on her. There was something about the way he watched her that made her feel understood, even when she couldn't find the right words. Thinking about what? Liam pressed gently. Emma paused, then sighed. I don't know this. Us. I didn't expect this to happen. I thought it was just going to be casual. You know, like two strangers meeting up. I don't think it's casual anymore, is it? Liam said, his voice low, but there was a softness to it, a tenderness she hadn't heard before. She finally looked up at him, meeting his gaze. His eyes weren't just curious anymore, they were searching, as if he was looking for something more. Emma's heart raced. She could feel the weight of the words she had been avoiding. She wanted to tell him how she felt, but the words felt stuck in her throat. Instead, she smiled awkwardly, trying to deflect the moment. I'm just not used to this, she admitted. Getting to know someone like this. In my world, things are always so uncertain. Liam reached across the table, his hand resting lightly on hers. The simple gesture sent a ripple through Emma. She looked down at their hands, her breath catching in her throat. The warmth of his touch seemed to steady her, but it also made her heart ache in a way she couldn't explain. I get that, Liam said quietly. But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. If you're willing to take the chance, I'd like to see where this goes. Not just a quick fling, Emma. Something real. The words hung in the air between them, filling the space with a mix of hope and fear. Emma's pulse quickened. What was she supposed to say to that? She had spent her whole life hiding behind walls she had built out of necessity. Could she really let someone in? Especially someone like Liam? She pulled her hand back slightly, not out of rejection, but because the weight of his words was starting to settle in her chest. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this. For him. For the possibility of something more. I don't know if I can promise that right now, she said, her voice soft and uncertain. Liam didn't seem hurt by her words. Instead, he gave her a reassuring smile, one that was full of understanding. I'm not asking you to promise anything. I'm just asking if you're open to the idea. We can take it slow. There's no rush. Emma swallowed, trying to push down the tightness in her chest. She had been so used to living in the moment, to keeping everything at arm's length, that the thought of something real scared her. But something about Liam's sincerity, his patience, made her want to try. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll try. I'm just scared. Liam nodded, his expression softening. I know. But you're not alone in this, Emma. You don't have to be. As they sat there, the world around them seemed to fade away. There was no judgment, no expectations, just the two of them, sharing a quiet moment. For the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could let someone in and let herself feel something real. But even as she started to open up, a small part of her still wondered if she was making a mistake. Was she ready for this kind of connection? Was she ready to risk her heart? She didn't know the answers, but for the first time in a long time, she was willing to find out. The days that followed felt different. Emma and Liam spent more time together, slowly getting to know one another in ways they hadn't before. She still struggled with the fear that came with opening up, but with every conversation, with every smile, she felt herself letting go, bit by bit. They talked about everything: her dreams of becoming an artist, his career in the tech world, and everything in between. Liam shared stories about his company, his childhood, and even his regrets, and Emma found herself doing the same. They weren't just two strangers anymore, they were beginning to feel like something more. One evening, as they sat in a cozy corner of the cafe they often visited, Emma couldn't help but notice how natural it felt to be with him. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people, enjoying each other's company. They'd shared countless stories and laughter, but now, as Liam sipped his tea, his gaze softened, and for the first time, Emma felt that familiar nervousness creeping in again. Something was different. Something was changing. "You've been quiet," Liam remarked, looking at her with a curious expression. Emma blinked, pulled from her thoughts. She had been staring at her coffee, her mind wandering. She hadn't realized how much her feelings for him had grown over the past few weeks. She smiled softly, trying to brush it off. "Sorry," she said, shaking her head. "I was just thinking. About us, I guess." Her heart skipped a beat as the words left her lips. Had she really just said that? She wasn't sure if she was ready to put her feelings into words. Liam's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was no judgment in his gaze, only understanding. "What about us?" he asked, his voice calm, inviting. Emma's chest tightened. She didn't know how to explain the whirlpool of emotions inside her. She didn't want to mess things up, but she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him. "I don't know. I didn't expect to feel like this," she admitted. "I mean, when we first met, it was just a casual thing. But now, it's like I'm not sure where I stand anymore." She swallowed, trying to find the right words. Liam reached across the table, his hand brushing hers in a gesture so simple, yet so meaningful. "You don't have to figure it all out right now, Emma. We're taking this one step at a time, remember?" His voice was soothing, and for the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she didn't have to have all the answers. She could just be. She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. But there was nothing. Liam wasn't rushing her, wasn't pushing her for something she wasn't ready to give. He was just there. And that meant more to her than she realized. "I'm glad you said that," Emma said softly. "Because I've been scared. Scared of getting too close, scared of what it could mean. But I don't want to keep holding back anymore. I think I'm ready to let go of that fear." Liam smiled, and this time, it reached his eyes. There was a warmth in his expression that made Emma's heart swell. "Good," he said simply. "Because I think we're both ready for something real." They sat in silence for a moment, but it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. The kind of silence that comes from knowing that something important has just been said, something that has the power to change everything. Emma didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't need them. She was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be the real thing. As they left the cafe that night, the cool air wrapping around them, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't afraid anymore. She didn't have to be. She wasn't walking this path alone anymore. And neither was Liam. They were both taking that first step towards something new. Something that didn't need to be perfect, but could be real. It wasn't the end of the story, but it was the beginning of a new chapter, and that, in itself, felt like a victory. Weeks passed, and as Emma and Liam's relationship grew, so did their understanding of each other. What had started as a casual meeting had slowly turned into something much more meaningful. Emma found herself thinking about him even when they weren't together, imagining what their future could look like. But as the connection deepened, a part of her still struggled with the weight of her own insecurities. She had never been someone who let her guard down easily, and now, with Liam, she wasn't sure how to navigate the growing feelings inside her. It was late one evening when she received a message from him. "Dinner tomorrow," the text read. "I want to take you somewhere special." Emma hesitated for a moment. She knew what kind of place Liam frequented, and the thought of stepping into that world made her nervous. It was one thing to be with him casually, but a more formal, intimate setting felt like a bigger step. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to say no. "Sure, I'd love that," she typed back, her fingers shaking slightly. She put the phone down and let out a long breath. What was she so afraid of? Liam had always made her feel comfortable, like she didn't need to pretend to be someone she wasn't. But still, the idea of being in a different world with him, a world that felt so far removed from her own, scared her. The next evening, she found herself standing in front of an elegant restaurant, the kind with sweeping glass windows and a polished marble entrance. The moment she stepped inside, she could feel the difference in the atmosphere. The lighting was soft, the tables neatly arranged with crisp white linens, and the sound of soft jazz filled the air. It was exactly the kind of place Liam frequented, but it was so far from her reality that she couldn't help but feel a little out of place. As she looked around, trying to adjust to the upscale surroundings, she spotted Liam waiting at a table in the corner. He looked relaxed in a tailored suit, his dark hair neatly styled, his eyes lighting up when he saw her walk in. He stood up as she approached, pulling out the chair for her with a smile that made her heart skip a beat. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice soft but sincere. Emma felt her cheeks flush, not used to being complimented in such a genuine way. She sat down, trying to push away the feeling of being underdressed compared to the refined setting. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little shaky. "I don't really know how to act in places like this." Liam chuckled, his eyes warm. "Don't worry about it. Just be yourself. That's the person I want to know." Emma smiled, feeling a bit of the tension ease from her shoulder. She glanced around the room, still not quite sure how to settle into the space, but Liam's presence beside her was comforting. He didn't expect her to be anything other than who she was. Their dinner was a slow, easy conversation, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood, about how she used to draw in the park near her home, escaping into her art when life felt overwhelming. Liam shared his experiences growing up, how he had always been focused on his career, but never truly felt fulfilled. He admitted that his success had never brought him the happiness he thought it would, and for the first time, Emma could see the vulnerability in him. The evening went on, and by the time they finished dessert, Emma felt something shift. She had come into the dinner with nerves, unsure of how to navigate this world, but now, sitting across from Liam, she realized that he had never once made her feel inadequate. In fact, he seemed to admire the person she was, and that made all the difference. As they walked outside, Liam took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I'm really glad you came tonight," he said quietly. "You've been on my mind a lot lately, Emma. I know this might seem fast, but I can't help how I feel." Emma stopped walking, her heart racing. She hadn't expected him to say something like that, but in that moment, she realized she felt the same way. "I feel it too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just scared." Liam looked at her with a soft, understanding smile. "I know. And I'm not asking for anything more than what you're willing to give. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Emma's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was allowing herself to truly believe in something, to trust in the possibility of a future with him. The fear still lingered, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been before. She was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be real. As they continued walking, the city lights twinkling around them, Emma felt a shift in herself. She was still unsure about the future, but she was no longer afraid to take the first step toward it. With Liam by her side, maybe this could be the start of something worth fighting for. As the weeks passed, Emma and Liam continued to spend time together, each meeting deepening the bond between them. But despite the growing connection, Emma couldn't shake the nagging feeling of uncertainty that lingered in the back of her mind. She had never been one to trust easily, and the idea of letting someone in, really letting them in, felt like a leap of faith she wasn't sure she was ready to take. Liam, on the other hand, seemed so sure, so confident in his feelings, and that only made Emma feel more torn. She didn't want to hurt him, but she also didn't want to be hurt herself. One night, after a long conversation that had stretched well past midnight, they sat on a park bench, the city lights flickering in the distance. The cool breeze ruffled Emma's hair as she hugged her coat tighter around herself, lost in thought. Liam, as always, seemed completely at ease beside her, his presence warm and comforting. But she could feel the weight of the moment, the pressure of what was to come. "Emma, I need to know where you stand," Liam said, his voice calm but serious. "I've been thinking a lot about us, and I know we're taking things slow, but I want to understand what this means to you. I don't want to rush you, but I can't keep pretending that I'm okay, with not knowing where this is going." Emma's heart raced. She hadn't expected him to be so direct. Her stomach twisted as she tried to find the words, but nothing came out. She had been afraid of this moment, afraid of being asked to define something that she wasn't sure she was ready to define. The uncertainty had been building, and now it felt like it was threatening to swallow her whole. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to be with you, Liam. I do. But I don't know how to move forward without the fear that I'm going to ruin everything. I've never been in a relationship where I've felt this vulnerable. And I'm scared." Liam didn't say anything at first, just let her words hang in the air between them. His expression softened, and he turned toward her, his eyes searching hers. "I get it," he said after a long pause. "You don't have to be perfect, Emma. I'm not asking you to be. I just want you to be honest with me, and with yourself. I've seen the way you care about me, and I feel the same way. But if you're not ready for that yet, that's okay, too. I just need to know that you're willing to give it a chance." Emma's heart clenched at his words. She had always been so guarded, so afraid of getting too close to anyone. But with Liam, it was different. She didn't want to let her fears control her anymore. Maybe it was time to let go, to trust that not everything would fall apart. "I want to try," she said, her voice steady now. "I want to be with you, Liam. But I need time. I can't promise everything right away, but I can promise that I'm willing to see where this goes." Liam's face lit up with a relieved smile. He reached over and took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. "That's all I need," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "We'll take it one step at a time. No pressure. I'm just happy you're willing to try." For the first time in weeks, Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that she didn't have to figure it all out tonight. With Liam by her side, maybe they could take things one day at a time. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to be afraid of what might come next. As they sat there, hand in hand, Emma realized something important. It wasn't about having all the answers or knowing exactly where their relationship would go. It was about taking the leap, trusting the journey, and knowing that they would figure it out together. In the days that followed, Emma and Liam found themselves falling into a comfortable rhythm. They spent more time together, slowly building a life that was just theirs. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and for Emma, that was all that mattered. They enjoyed quiet evenings together, going for walks in the park or grabbing coffee at the local cafe. For the first time in a long time, Emma didn't feel like she was walking through life alone. She felt like she had found something worth fighting for. But as the days passed, Emma began to notice something that made her heart race. Liam was more than just a guy she was casually dating. He was becoming someone she cared for deeply, someone who was changing her life in ways she hadn't anticipated. And with that realization came a new wave of fear. What if she wasn't enough for him? What if she wasn't the person he thought she was? One evening, after a dinner that had left her feeling more vulnerable than she had in a long time, Emma found herself standing in front of her mirror, her thoughts running wild. She had just received an invitation to a gala Liam was attending the following week. It was the kind of event where everyone would be dressed in their finest, the kind of place where Emma felt she didn't belong. She had never been comfortable in those types of settings, and the thought of being out of place made her nervous. She could already imagine the looks from people who didn't understand her, who wouldn't understand her. The thought of being thrust into that world, surrounded by people who were more polished, more successful, more everything than she was, left her feeling small. She thought about telling Liam she couldn't go, that she wasn't ready for something like that. But as she stood there, staring at her reflection, something shifted. She realized she wasn't afraid of the event itself. She was afraid of failing, afraid of not being good enough for him. But Liam had never once made her feel that way. He had always made her feel like she was enough, just as she was. With a deep breath, Emma texted Liam. "I'll go with you to the gala," she wrote, her fingers trembling as she hit send. She wasn't sure why she had said yes, but something inside her told her that this was a moment of change for her, a moment where she could choose to face her fears instead of running from them. The night of the gala arrived quickly, and as Emma stood in front of her mirror, dressed in the sleek black dress Liam had picked out for her, she felt a mix of nerves and excitement. She wasn't the woman she had been when she first met him. She had grown, learned, and allowed herself to be vulnerable in ways she never thought possible. But tonight, she was going to take another step forward. When Liam picked her up, he looked at her with pride, his eyes shining with admiration. "You look incredible," he said, his voice full of warmth. Emma smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just about the dress or the event. It was about how he saw her, how he made her feel valued. As they entered the gala together, Emma could feel the weight of all the eyes on her. The whispers, the looks, they were there, but they didn't matter as much as they once had. She realized that as long as she had Liam by her side, she didn't need to worry about fitting in. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. As the night wore on, Emma found herself laughing, talking, and enjoying herself in a way she never expected. Liam was right there with her, his hand gently resting on the small of her back, guiding her through the evening. He introduced her to people from his world, people who had once seemed so distant and out of reach. But now, they were just people who saw her for who she truly was. Later that evening, as they stepped out onto the balcony for some fresh air, Liam turned to her with a smile that made Emma's heart skip a beat. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "You've come so far." Emma smiled, her heart full. "I never thought I'd be here," she admitted. "But with you, I feel like I can do anything." Liam leaned in, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his eyes soft and affectionate. "You're more than enough, Emma. And I'm so glad you're here with me." In that moment, Emma realized that she had finally found the confidence to believe in herself, to trust that she could be part of something beautiful and real. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to hide who she was. She was enough. And that was all that mattered. Months passed, and as Emma and Liam's relationship continued to grow, so did their bond. They had faced their fears, their insecurities, and the unknown together, and now, they were stronger for it. Emma had stopped doubting herself, stopped questioning whether she was enough. She realized that the love she had found with Liam wasn't just a fairy tale, it was real, it was solid, and it was built on mutual respect, vulnerability, and trust. One evening, as they sat in their favorite cafe, Emma felt the familiar sense of peace that had become so important to her. She looked across the table at Liam, his smile warm and genuine, and for the first time in a long time, she knew that everything she had gone through had led her here. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into that blind date months ago. She was someone new, someone better, because of the love and support she had found in him. "I've been thinking," Liam said, his voice soft, his gaze never leaving hers. "About everything we've been through. And I want you to know how much I appreciate you, Emma. You've taught me so much about love, about trust, and about being open to life's surprises. Emma smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. She had come so far, but so had he. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I've always been afraid of letting go, but with you, it just feels right." Liam's smile widened, his eyes filled with affection. "I feel the same way. You've changed my life in ways I can't even explain. I've always been focused on work, on building my empire, but with you, I've found something far more important." The conversation was quiet for a moment, but there was no tension, only the understanding that passed between them. They didn't need to say everything out loud, their connection was enough. As they finished their coffee, Liam took Emma's hand, gently pulling her up from her seat. He looked at her with a soft, knowing smile that made her heart skip a beat. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you for a while," he said, his voice low, but steady. Emma looked at him, her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" she asked, her pulse quickening. Liam took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "Emma, from the moment I met you, I knew you were special. You've made me believe in things I never thought possible. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Emma's heart stopped. She blinked, her mind racing as she processed the words he had just said. She had imagined this moment in her mind many times, but now that it was here, she didn't know what to say. But as she looked into Liam's eyes, she realized that the answer was already in her heart. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Liam's face broke into a smile so bright, it took Emma's breath away. He reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing against her skin. "I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Emma realized that this was the moment she had been waiting for. She wasn't just accepting a proposal, she was accepting a life filled with love, trust, and the promise of something real. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The future was still uncertain, but with Liam by her side, Emma knew she was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had already built something beautiful, and now, they were ready to build even more. This was just the beginning of a lifetime of love, and for the first time, Emma felt truly, completely at home.